And you are here live with us on C Major before the show. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be with you today. And we have a lot to talk about. We are sharing with you some of the great things we were able to do this week. And greetings from the greater New York City area. We're having autumn-like and gorgeous weather. And I can hardly wait to tell you what this week was about for me. Of course, it's about chords, right? I love chords. As you know, I love talking about chords. My life changed. My life completely changed. It transformed over 20 years ago when I stumbled upon students that were learning to play by chords and by ear. And then following that, I had a chance to play with musicians who did not read music. And it really just changed my perspective on music making altogether. So this week, I attended my first jazz workshop in New York. It was a big deal. It was a really big deal. A big step for me because I have been looking for a place to learn more about the jazz approach to playing the piano. And previously, I had some experience with that. I had a professor, I think I told you, in grad school that wrote a book on jazz and blues. But to actually go to the University of the Streets, so to speak, and hear it firsthand from someone who has stood with some of the jazz giants, literally, and is probably one of the oldest living teachers of jazz harmony. It was just really, really exciting. So first of all, let's talk about our definition of jazz, because if you read today's description of the show, it asks you that question. What do you think jazz is? Do you know what jazz is? Can you even separate jazz from classical? Those are some of the things that I'm thinking about today. So I have a lot on the brain. I hope you'll bear with me, and I hope you will tune in later for the C Major radio show, because we're keeping our promise over there to talk about the C major chord over there. So we'll talk about it within the context of some of the things that we mentioned here, but I'll say a little bit more about that later. But jazz, in our dictionary of music that we use here on the podcast, is a kind of music that emerged in the southern United States, particularly in the city of New Orleans around the end of the 19th century. So you may know that already, you may not. So we just wanted to put that in some can hardly get it out, and some sort of historical context for you today, because a lot of people don't realize where jazz comes from. And so, I'll talk a little bit about myself today because, I'm a Southern girl. So coming from the South, why wasn't jazz a more prominent part of my life as a piano student? That's still a question that I have today. Why was I more in tune with learning to play classical as opposed to learning to play blues and jazz? I really can't tell you the answer to that. I don't know if it was because I was able to read music well and then just went on that path of musical achievement. Why didn't I go down the other path of creativity, pure creativity, where you don't read off of quote-unquote paper music, you just make the music? So that's still a mystery to me. But anyway, let's keep going. The term itself, talking about jazz, the origins of which are obscure, gained currency around 1915 and has since been applied to diverse and continually changing styles. Among the progenitors of these styles were gospel singing, spirituals, and other types of singing current among black slaves, the music of brass bands, string bands, and minstrel shows. And by the way, if you can catch that documentary that's on now, I'm not promoting it, but I'm just saying, catch that documentary that's on now on, I believe it's on PBS or either WNYC, something like that. But there's a particular channel for it, and I believe it's the documentary from Ken Burns that's talking about country music. They really show some really great footage and some really great photos of some of the things we just talked about. What does a minstrel show look like? What was some of the music that was presented then, And so just to know that jazz comes from a lot of what was going on around the end of the 19th century and then around 1915. So just put that into context for you. Okay, now that word that I said, I hope I spelled it correctly and I hope I said it correctly. It's progenitors. I said progenitors, or you could say progenitors. I don't know, it's not a word that I use every day. But that was the sentence. Among the progenitors of these styles were gospel singing. So I have to look up progenitors. I have no idea what that means. Spirituals and other types of singing current among black slaves. The music of brass bands, string bands, and minstrel shows, and probably rhythms of African drumming brought to the U.S. by slaves. So that's interesting because I think it's still a mystery of where jazz really comes from. And is jazz an extension of classical music? Does jazz pick up where classical music left off in terms of improvisation? I think that's a topic too. Throughout the history of jazz, its tonal language has been essentially that of Western Europe, combined, however, with characteristic inflections of pitch. And then we have to look under blues. We won't look under blues today, but I'll look under blues maybe next time. And then I'm just going to stop. I'm probably going to miss some important parts because on the next page of this it does talk about the piano. Other characteristics of much jazz are steady, though often strongly syncopated rhythms, established by a rhythm section, most often consisting of drums, double bass, played pizzicato, or tuba, and piano. And then the big word, improvisation. Improvisation by soloists and groups within the framework of some harmonic pattern, often that of a popular song. And effects of timbre, T-I-M-B-R-E, and intonation, different from those employed in the tradition of Western concert music. Okay, so we'll stop there because it goes into the styles or sub-styles of jazz, which we'll come back to later. But that's a big mystery for me because, I've also been listening to some discussions of where jazz picks up in terms of where classical music left off. So was jazz brought here from Europe in a sense? And is it or can it be seen as an extension of classical music? Because jazz does involve improvisation and classical music stopped being so much a focus of improvisation, if you could say it that way. Just think about that for a moment, just marinate on that. But this workshop, let me tell you, it was amazing. Let me just play for you because I could just ramble on here, but I know you have lots of things to do with your time. And it is a beautiful Saturday afternoon. try to, if you can, please get outside, enjoy the gorgeous weather. It's the last weekend before autumn strikes, which I believe is Monday, the first official day of autumn. And so I would say soak up the sun while you can, especially here in New York. So let me just see if I can play that. I need to stop the music that's playing now. I just had the volume down. And let me just let you hear a little bit of what went on in the workshop. It was an amazing time. Okay, so that was just to give you a sample of some of the things that we were doing in jazz class. It was just such a fun time. I just can't tell you how much fun we had. And everybody was in a great mood. I mean, so imagine a workshop that lasts for about 6 hours, from 6 o'clock in the evening to about midnight. I wasn't able to stay that late. I left because I had to get back, because I had to get up very early the next day. But I stayed longer than I had intended because it was so much fun. And so it just reminded me of how much I love music and how much music needs to be a part of my day. And it just reminded me also the joy that you feel just being in a rehearsal. It's something that you can hardly explain, just the joy that you feel, really. So I highly recommend it. And I hope that I can attend another class. I really hope so. And if I do, you'll be the first to hear about it. Now, let me, excuse me, let me just preface the C major radio show by saying we're going to focus on the C chord, but I'm going to focus on it within the context of playing other things on the piano. And I grapple with the idea of playing a C major scale or chording a scale. But you'll see what I do over there. But you are invited. I like to invite all of my listeners to come over there and be with us, because it's a different discussion. It's more focused on chords. But here we just kind of warm you up for that. And speaking of warm-up, that was a warm-up that you just heard. It was a warm-up for the singing part of the workshop. Now, the first part of the workshop was more like this. So now I'm going to play something else for you. So hang on one second. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I mean, it was just to give you a sample of some of the things that we worked on in the workshop. So if you were brave enough to play in front of the teacher, who is one of the world's renowned teachers of jazz, and just unbelievable the love really that was in the room for this teacher, and the love that was in the room for each other, just being there, learning something together. And it was just really, really great to experience that. So I can't wait to go back again. I hope that I can make it there again before it gets too cold, and then I decide to stay in and not go to the city. But it was a gorgeous day in the city, let me tell you that. I mean, around Columbus Circle, oh my gosh, the sun was shining. There were people riding on horses, and, you know, the whole carriage ride thing. People were out, and the waterfall effects were out around Columbus Circle. And, you know, that's also close to Jazz at Lincoln Center, is right across the street. But Jazz at Lincoln Center was just gorgeous at night. I think they've changed the colors of the signs or something. They just really popped out at you. So it was just a fun night. So again, you're invited to tune in to the C Major radio show a little bit later on this evening. We will talk about the C major chord. I'm going to share with you some other approaches to playing that chord. I'm going to include some elements of scales. And I think I may even include something that I took away from this workshop, just to, you know, to whet your appetite a little bit and to just share, really. So we like to, here on the podcast, be a place where you can come, not just for the core teaching of everything, but really just to see us as a supplement. Because as you know, I'm a big believer in text notation as a supplement to piano materials. And that's really the basis for this podcast. I mean, if you are taking piano lessons already, kudos to you. That's great. That's wonderful. Keep hanging in there. You won't regret it later in life, especially when you're 92 and you can sit down and play something that really brings you joy and keeps you going, really. And so just stick with it. Don't give it up, and you're going to be just fine. But let's say you're in a piano class or with a teacher that's just not giving you everything that you're seeking, then, or you still have questions. That's where we hope to kind of come in, because I'm a big believer now in chords, and I'm a big believer now in text notation. And I just like to see my students be successful at the piano. I can't tell you how many times I've had students that came to me and said, I took piano lessons for all these years and now I can't play anything. Usually my adult students. But then I have some students that are in their teens that took piano lessons since they were 5 and still have struggling. You know, they're still struggling. They still have struggles with just sitting down to the piano and play. And so, or playing something. Or if you said on the spot, okay, play Twinkle Twinkle, they'll still struggle with the intervals of that. So what is that? You know, just really being able to see the landscape of the piano keys that's in front of them. That's what we're hoping to kind of shed some light on if we can. And let me say this, if you ever need a recommendation for what's going on with some of the big giants in music education, the music industry, trust me, I am keeping my eyes and ears open for you. If you want any recommendations for literature, for method books, for workshops, and for publications, magazines, let me know. I can give you a list of what's coming across my desk. So I want to be helpful, continue to be helpful along those lines. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to play some music for you really quickly. So I'm going to go back to my original soundtrack for the podcast, which you all know is the piano music of C major. And I'm going to play a little bit for you. I'm going to take a sip of my orange juice Yes, I do drink orange juice. Sometimes I drink apple juice. And then I'm going to gather my books and I'm going to go to where my piano is located, and we're going to continue from the piano. You're listening to C Major Before the Show. Back in a moment. Okay, I am back and I'm ready to go now to my other location so I can play some at the piano for you. And I hope you enjoy what I'm going to share today. It really is something that's on my mind, and so I don't mind sharing it. But while I'm walking to that location, I just want to know, have you been watching the new Kelly Clarkson show? Now, that is such an interesting show for me because she's a musician that is well known. And so she's done some amazing things. I'm not being a critic. I'm just saying she's done some amazing things. So I'm not judging her in any way. But she said something on a recent interview that made me think, why doesn't she want to share more of her own music making on the show? I think that would be a good thing. And one reason why I say that is because I think that's what Harry Connick Jr. was trying to do when he had his show. Now, I went to his show a couple of times. Amazing show. Like the most amazing live band ever. Brought so much excitement to that show. And so I want to see that continue, really. And so my question is, and I haven't seen this, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Kelly Clarkson has a live band on her show. But again, why wouldn't she? That would be my suggestion to one of the executive producers. Let Kelly Clarkson have a live band on her show. You know? And let her talk about her music making a little bit more as part of the show. That's what I would do. Now, that's just my opinion, guys. I have to put on the laugh track for that. And I am not a comedian. I am not. There have been way too many pianists who were great at being comedians in our history to call themselves comedians at the piano. That's not what I'm aiming for here, but I do appreciate knowing about the history of some of the greatest comedian pianists, if you will. Okay, now, just to prep you for later, I'm going to play it now and talk about it later over at the C Major Radio Show. We'll be talking about the C chord. Now, I don't know if my piano is tuned to your piano, so that's why I hesitate to play a lot, because sometimes you play something and then their piano is a half pitch off or something like that. So imagine you have a C major chord, right? And so let's say if you want to play a C major scale, right? I would say try chording that scale. Okay, this time without pedal. Okay. And so you may ask, okay, well, what is a C major chord good for anyway? You know, why learn a C major chord and why start with C major? You don't have to start with C major. As a matter of fact, I know of a particular world-renowned teacher who, well, I won't say he asks you to avoid C, but he believes in starting on something other than C, especially when it comes to technical exercises. And so I would agree to that. But here we are, and we are going to talk about C major today. So introduction to chords, major chords. First of all, we're saying a chord is made up of 3 or more tones that are played together. There are other definitions out there, believe you. There are other definitions out there. Chords can be constructed on each step of the major scale. And so a little bit of history for you. One of the central features, or central figures rather, of California blues was Charles Brown. He had a performance style that was laid back, that was mellow. In October 1997, he received the National Endowment for the Arts Heritage Fellowship Award, as well as having received W.C. Handy Awards for Best Vocalist, Best Pianist, and Best Album of the Year. That's amazing. And so he found a way to use the C chord, obviously, because he used it in blues. And I don't know how many keys he plays in, but there's a nice picture of him, a nice photo. So imagine you were going to use a C major chord in blues. Is that how you would use a C major chord? How would you use a C major chord? So if you use a C major chord as part of blues, then you need to know blues chords are considered the 3 most important chords used in blues and jazz and rock, and they are built on the 1st, the 4th, and the 5th steps of the scale. So go ahead, if you can find C on the piano, 1, 2, C is to the left of your 2 black key group, and then find your E, and then find your G, and then play that. And then again, if you know anything about playing a C major scale, then you would just count up to the 4th degree and play your chord there, and then count to the 5th degree and then play your chord there. So, and these are considered your blues chords, but C major is the leader to that. So think about the C chord, think about the C major chord, think about introducing yourself to chord progressions such as playing the blues. And next time I hope to talk with you further about our definition of jazz as we found in our official music dictionary here for C major before the show, and to talk more about the substyles or the styles of jazz. But here we are, and blues would be one of those substyles or styles. And it says a chord progression is an organized series of changing chords. So my challenge to you is to try to hear what those chord changes are. It just seems to me it's so much easier for students to hear the change of something as simple as C, F, and G. And so that's probably one reason why we teach something as simple as C, F, and G at first, as opposed to going into other chords that you hear that you may say, oh, that sounds like jazz. The blues progression is a basic jazz progression, generally 12 measures long. It consists of chords built on the first, fourth, and fifth steps of the scale, and is used in all styles and periods of blues, jazz, and rock. So imagine that. So you should try to memorize your C major chord and then memorize your F chord and your G chord. We're coming up on that, really. We're going ABC order over at the C Major Radio Show. So far, we've made it up to C. Next week, we'll be on to D. So we're going to inch our way up. Now, the C major blues progression, you should try to play and memorize that. So you'll start off with a C chord. You can hold that for 4 counts if you want to. Play that 4 times. And then go to F and play that 2 times. And then go back to C and play that 2 times. And then go to G. And go to F. And then go to C. Now, this is not something that I really teach my students. We usually start learning folk tunes, Christmas carols, and simple tunes that they can remember. And so unless somebody says, I really want to learn the blues, I don't really start by teaching them a C major blues progression, although I could. Because in the first lesson, when we talk about chords, I am talking about C, F, and G at first anyway. So, not sure why that is. Anyway, tune in next week when we try to cover a little bit more in terms of blues and blues progression and blues and jazz chords, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about the history that I'm seeing in front of me. But for now, we're going to take a little bit of a detour and go into some of the things that I was learning about earlier this week in my jazz class. So excited about that class. Jazz workshop, if you care. Now, there was a song that was very new to me. Well, first of all, do you speak Portuguese? Does anyone speak Portuguese? If you do, then you know how to pronounce something that's spelled D-I-N-D-I. And I did not know that you're supposed to pronounce it as Jinji, Jin-Jee. I don't know Portuguese, so I didn't know that's how you're supposed to pronounce it. So D-I-N-D-I is pronounced Jinji. And so let me tell you, this song was so powerful, really. And we sang it in the original key, and then we sang it in other keys, and we just kept singing it. I mean, it was just a lot of repetition going on in the class. And I just could not get this chorus out of my head. I kept singing it. And then I couldn't get the song out of my head, and then I looked it up, and I saw all these great people have recorded the song. Everyone from Ella Fitzgerald to Frank Sinatra to others. And I just thought, wow. And even the original recording of this by the person who wrote the music, I loved the way that he sang it. And so in the class, we had people taking different turns, singing the song, trying to give meaning to it. And I love what the professor said. He said, please, whatever you do not sing what's on this page. I'm paraphrasing, but he just put it to us like that. He said, look, if you play everything that's on the page, you'll die, And I have to add laughter because he really meant it. And the whole class just erupted in laughter because they knew, again, that he was just being humorous with us, which was, again, such an amazing class. But okay, so that's just a little bit of the melody. But what I loved is how it starts off with my favorite chords, which are major 7 chords. I love major 7 chords. So here you go. That's an E flat major 7 chord. Okay, and then you go to a D flat major 7 chord, and then you go back to an E flat major 7 chord, then you go back to a D flat major 7 chord, and then my favorite, you go to a C major 7 chord. Isn't that nice? That's really nice. So let's say if you didn't know anything about 7 chords and then you just said, okay, well, let me just play it as an E flat triad, going to a D flat triad, going to an E flat triad, going to a D flat triad, going to a C major chord. So I want you to hear the difference. So this is one way to put C major to use. And let's see. Not quite the same effect, right? So, and I will say this, I'm playing the full 4-note major 7th chord. So that's what you're hearing. I'm not voicing it in any way. And since I have this textbook in front of me, I'm going to turn to major 7 chords and see what they have to say about major 7 chords. But that's how the song starts. It starts with sky so vast as the sky, with faraway clouds just wandering by. Where did they go? And then it goes on from there. So I love that he started this. He kind of colors the song with the major 7 sound, even if you wanted to arpeggiate these. And it's free, so... I wonder how pianists would color something like that. And I just played these in my right hand around middle C. So that's what you heard just now. But if you can, check it out. Check out the recording. You can find it on YouTube. The name of the song is Din, but it's spelled Dindi. And then you'll see the original video that came out, I guess somewhere around the 60s, 1965 or something like that. And then you will see other artists of the jazz era doing their renditions of the song. Okay, now let's just go to this section where it talks about major 7 chords. I believe I can find that really quickly. And then I will go to a different book. So I told you I had a lot to share today. And while I'm looking for that, let me just say I also had another surprise that came across my desk this week. And my wish is coming true. It really is coming true. I wished for a long time to be able to start to have conversations with other teachers and to do collaborations, and not just musicians, but artists too. So it looks like that may just be coming. My dream may just be coming true. Because what happens when you're out here and you're trying to teach music, sometimes you lose touch with people that really care about music enough to stop and have a conversation over coffee. And that's what I've been longing for. So what you heard me play was major 7 chords. Now you can create a melody. That's what this lesson is teaching you, playing major 7 chords. So it starts off with that C major 7 chord. Okay, so how would you create a melody? So what they're suggesting is saying, okay, create a right hand melody for major 7 chords. Play and repeat each major 7 chord sequence very slowly, something that my students don't like to do. They don't like to go slow. They like to go fast, all of them. Stopping between chords, so you really get it in your ear. Another important part, which is what I love about jazz rehearsal, rest for a moment and get your hands set. So in the sample that I played for you earlier, that's what you were hearing. You were hearing these moments of silence where the person was really trying to absorb what they were playing for the professor and really take it in and get his wisdom on where to go next with the voicing. Rest for a moment and get your hands set, then play the next sequence, continuing throughout all keys. Now, that was also another important point, that if you play jazz, get ready, you're going to be playing at all keys. Or you may decide, I don't want to think in terms of keys, let me just think in terms of sound. You could do that too. Play and repeat each major seventh at a slightly faster tempo without stopping between the chord sequences. Increase the tempo as you become more secure. And then there's a recording that you can play along with. And I've posted this on my social media, the whole idea of woodshedding, which means practicing. And so, let's see. Okay, so that would be on a C major 7th chord. Okay, or you could just practice on a triad if you want to. You can do the same thing. But they're saying, use that to help you with getting some ideas on how you would include major 7 chords in your playing, or in case of a C major triad, how would you play it? What would be your approach? Could you create a whole song just with a C major triad? You may try that too. We'll come back to this, so stay tuned for that. Now, I have another book in front of me that I wish to share, and then I'm going to share with you something else. Now, this is bear with me one moment. Now, this is interesting. Let me just put this up here for a second. So I'm seeing something that says, put this to the side here for a moment. And this is an exercise for you that says, here's an idea for 7 chord improvisation. But it's funny. What it doesn't tell you is that these are major 7 chords. So this is an old school book too. It was written in the 60s. But let me just see what the right hands do. So. Okay, let me play that because I like the way this is sounding. Okay, 1 second. For you as if I'm starting with just a C triad and then going up the scale. You hear me? And then back down. And then back in. So those are just triads. Let me try the melody again. And then you can end on C. Now again, just so you hear the major 7 chord sound. Tell you that this professor that was teaching us is against playing, those muddy chords in the left hand. Like, he wants you to really think about the voicing and the hands should play together. So that's new for me. I had seen a lot of organists come into church. They were playing the Hammond. They were playing, all these different ways of voicing the chords and really creating the mood for the service. And so I've taught jazz, I've taught blues, but I still have a lot to learn myself. It's the first time I'm really learning how to play hands together in this way and really think about the voicing in a Bill Evans way, whatever way you may say it, a Thelonious Monk type of way. So I have a lot of listening to do because I've been reading so much all these years, and then to really just say, okay, I'm going to turn my ears up and really, 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 really listen. And my listening has gotten better already, but it's an idea. If you want to do what they call 7-chord improvisation or improvisation on triads, experiment with the rhythm and the chords for variety. And then the most important thing you want to do, try it in several keys. So we are going to go into transposition right now just for the sake of time. So I'm going to close that book. We'll be revisiting that book because it has a lot of great ideas, even though it's old school. I think that book came about because the author was really trying to research ways that students should be more successful playing the piano, not just stick in one key. And so I think he was finding a way to do that. And then along came some other methods to say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to water it down a little bit more. We really want people to get it. So who knows who he really was able to teach during his lifetime and really have them get what he was trying to get, because it really takes a special student, I think, sometimes to really get all of what you are trying to introduce. So I don't know if he found that 1% or that 2% of students that were willing to do what he was asking. Now let's go into another approach here to the piano. And I said I was going to think about starting you on scales. And I thought about it. And what I want to do is just introduce you, not to chords, believe it or not, but for the first time, and you're going to give me some applause and cheers for this, for the first time, if ever, or if in a long time in the history of this podcast, I'm going to talk with you about scales and scale runs. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm. I really appreciate that. Okay, now this is taken from materials that this famous jazz professor is trying to impart to his students. And so he says, in many jazz lines, you may have noticed the importance of an added half step to allow an eighth note line to come out right rhythmically in 4/4 time. Okay, so talking about jazz, nothing else. In other words, with an added chromatic note or two, a descending scale played in eighth notes. Beginning on any degree of the scale will arrive at the first degree of the scale on the beat. So I guess if you're thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So I don't know which beat you're talking about, because if you add that extra note, it makes it in 5/4 time and not 4/4 time. But this is what it says. So to my eyes, I'm seeing eighth notes. I'm seeing running, walk. That's what I'm saying. They put it in more simple terms. And so we use that sometimes in piano class. Just say the eighth notes are running and then the quarter notes are walking. And just thinking about the time values if you have eighth notes. Right? I believe those are called minims in some places in the world. But we're going to say eighth notes. So let's go backwards. Let's start with a C major scale and moving the way this professor wants us to move. So okay. Okay, so I just did that all from C. So if you play it that way, it almost creates 11 scale steps to a scale run, and not 8, as we're accustomed to. Right? But I'm just trying to figure out what do they mean by rhythmically and 4/4 time. Because if I count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay, so where is this? Okay, so that moved it along actually to 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So I'm going to need to ask a little bit more information for this. Okay. Okay. So, in other words, with an added chromatic note or two, a descending scale played in eighth notes beginning on any degree of the scale will arrive at the first degree of the scale on the beat. To really get this under the fingers, then you practice. Oh, okay, we were practicing descending dominant 7th scales. And so you can see that any scale run originating on a chord tone requires one added half step position between the 8th and 7th degrees of the scale. A scale run starting on a non-chord tone requires either no half steps or 2. The 2 are positioned between the 9th and 8th and the 8th and 7th degrees. So as I learn more, because again, I'm being a student now, and I'm really trying to absorb all of this. But let me just check one more source. I just put it away. The one for blues and jazz, and see what they have to say about dominant 7th scales, if anything. Because this book includes everything for acoustic piano, for electric keyboard. It includes basic blues, jazz scales, chords, progressions, riffs, everything. You can play in Latin, you can play boogie, pop, ballad, rock styles. You can learn the basic improv techniques for solo and combo playing. But let's just see what they say about dominant 7th scales, if anything, and to see if they agree with what we just did. If I can't find it quickly, what I'll do is just save it for another time. Okay, so it's not jumping out at me. So what I'll do is just save it for another time. So keep that in mind. We're going to keep this book here in place. And feel free to join me for a deeper discussion as we go forward with our discussion on chords. And this is an unofficial series, really, on chords for students. What I wanted to do is just teach some basic things, but also throw some interesting parts in, very different from what we did in the past. And it's not an official series. It's not meant to be something that will help you pass any exams or anything like that. It's really just to say, okay, if you are a student of the piano and you want to learn a little bit more about chords and some chords talk, and there's something we can say here to get you super interested in asking further questions, then that's great. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is change my location. So you hear some movement. And how was your weekend so far? Hopefully you had a good weekend. Did you do anything fun? I hope so. So speaking of fun, I had some other things that came across my desk. You're going to like this because if you are in the greater New York City area and you want to attend some very interesting concerts, we have some suggestions for you. So hang on for a moment. What I'm going to do now is turn on some music. We've been away from the recorded music. And then I'm going to get another sip of my juice, trying to stay filled with vitamin C because it's that time of year now when people start sneezing. And you have to be super careful and make sure you take in all of your vitamin C so you can keep well. And then we'll say something else about wellness in a moment. You're listening to C Major Before the Show. back here on C Major Before the Show. I'm your host, C Major Porter. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm very glad to be with you. We're just turning down our music here for a moment. And so the other thing I wanted to say about the Kelly Clarkson show, I think she said it was weird for her to play her own music on the show. And I'm thinking, not if the executive producers set it up in a way that it makes sense. She could actually teach you a little bit about what she does with her own music making. That would be great. Don't you guys want to see that? I want to see that. And so, I hope that in the future she will share more of her music. Is it weird? You guys think it's weird for me to share my own piano music on my podcast? Is that weird? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, if I'm thinking about it as a way to share with you the way that I make music and the way I made music at a very critical point in my life, and that's how it came out, I would hope that it would make you feel like, oh, if she could do that, I could do that too. Because the playing is not very sophisticated if you listen to it, right? I did that on purpose. I wanted to show you can play music simply and still express something. And you don't have to play a million notes. You don't have to play classical. You don't have to play something else to just show you can rip and run up and down the piano. Just play something that is simple. And that's what I was trying to do. And I use the key of C major a lot, as you notice on the recording. But I would love to hear Kelly Clarkson share some of her music. I mean, Harry Connick Jr. did it on his show when he had his show. He would just jump on the keyboard and just start jamming. It was like amazing. And people in the audience were asking him, "Oh, could you just play something on the grand piano?" And one time he hesitated and he's like, "Well, it's not really mic'd properly." And then they got it mic'd. He was like, "I just played something on the other keyboard," which is kind of funny. And then, funny. And then they mic'd the grand piano. It was the white one, They mic'd it so he could actually sit down and play something, which pleased his audience, which was just amazing. But I think Kelly should sing more on her show, right? Don't you guys think so? I hope so. I would love to see that. And if she could play piano, I would love to see her do that too. As long as her record label agrees with that. But anyway, enough about that. It's just on my mind for some reason. I think I'm just thinking about it within the context of music making. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to post a live poll. I hope you liked the live poll from last week. And what I'm going to do now is pull up another live poll because I want to know what you think about jazz. What are your thoughts about jazz? So let me see if I can pull up that poll. I thought I made a note about that. Oh, here it is. Live poll. I make notes of myself. Okay, so you're going to hear me typing a little bit. Maybe I should play some music while I'm doing that, so you don't get bored. Just a little music in the background. So you're probably going to see me answer my own poll. So until I can really get people involved in the poll and get some live interactive audience participation from people that I actually know that listen to the podcast, I'll just be posting it just to kind of warm you up a little bit on some of the things that I'll be asking. So let's just see. Okay, so now I'm going to create. And this one's called Jazz Harmony. Do you believe that jazz music is an extension of classical music? And this is going to be simple. Yes. No. And then I'm going to say maybe. Yeah, we'll just do that. Let's keep it simple. Now, what I hope to do in the future is, make it a little bit more either open-ended or post some pictures if I can do that. I don't know. I'm at the free level right now. Okay. Do you believe that jazz music is an extension of classical music? Okay. Let me see if I can present this now. By sharing it. See if I can share it on my social media. Okay, so let's get out of that. Just post it on one of my social media pages. And now I'm going to post it on the other one. Okay. All right, and then I'll just double check what I've posted as the presenter. And then we'll take it from there. Okay, so if you happen to be live with us, you're listening, and you want to participate in that poll, just check our social media. We just posted there. And if you don't know what our social media is, just ask me. I'll tell you. And so now, let me just lower my music here for a moment. I'm going to keep it running so I can just turn it up when I want. Now, we were talking about chording a C major scale. So what I'm hoping to do, I hope I can find this. I don't know where my monotron is, guys. I lost my monotron. How do you lose a monotron? Very easily, I guess. But it was over here. I'm only seeing my rhythm machine. I lost my monotron. Because I was going to, continue my discussion about sense over there within the context of a C major scale. I also talk about how you cannot chord a C major scale and on a monotron. And so, a lot of people just like the way it sounds anyway. But I can't find my monotron. I should get a case for my monotron. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hello, monotron. Okay, so later on in today's podcast at C Major Radio Show, listen up because the monotron is coming out for the podcast, and I'm going to share my synth legend story. Last time, unfortunately, I had a technical difficulty, and I wasn't able to share my story the way that I promised. I put something totally different in its place. So if you listen to that, then you will not hear the story. And what was there, we quickly took it down and just replaced it. But we're hoping to bring it to you live today. So hopefully everything goes well, technically speaking. And now let me just pull up my other jazz harmony textbook that came across my desk. And this one is called Jazz Harmony at the Piano. So I know I've mentioned something about this book before, but what's so fascinating is how they really get you to think about how jazz ties into classical and how jazz harmony may not be jazz harmony at all, really. That one professor that I had a chance to see in person, which again was just awesome, even says that he's able to write a Chopin-esque type song. So if you hear him play it, you can just see how his hands just glide over the piano. Oh my gosh, it's just amazing. And so he kind of alludes to that. He says that jazz is an extension of classical music, and then he shows how he can use his approach to jazz and playing harmonic lines, improvised lines and harmony, how he can use his knowledge of that, his experience, his expertise in that, and create something that sounds like Chopin. The other surprising thing was that he didn't even really quite remember what he did. He had memorized it to use his words. I'm like, I know exactly what he's talking about. So if a melody comes to you, if a song comes to you, and if you don't sit down and really practice it, it may or may not stick. I know exactly what he's talking about. But there's no doubt in my mind, if he really sat down to, and put his mind to it, he could create another one. So what I loved about this textbook on jazz harmony was saying the book itself does not pretend to be a piano method. I love that because, if you think of yourself as kind of supplementing, I think that's in a way a kind of safer way to position yourself, because people will come after you, let me tell you. If you start talking about you're going to put out a jazz method or a piano method, they'll go, what about my method? I have a method too. I know how to teach. There's so many teachers in the world. So many teachers in the world. But I think teaching is where it is. I think if you can really start to think of yourself as a person that wants to learn more about music and then share that with others, I think it's going to really, things will really work out well for you if you think in those terms. And not in terms of just showing off. That was the other thing in the class. We had a couple people in the class that really just were there to show off. There's no other way to put it. They were there to show off, and they were there to prove something to the professor. And I'm sure he didn't appreciate that, but he's such a gentle soul, really, that it probably didn't even faze him. He just said, look, this is how it is. This is what you should be doing. This is my experience. This is my wisdom. And I believe in my heart of hearts, he's the last piano Jedi when it comes to jazz. I really believe that. One of the last piano Jedis, I say it like that. If you can call him that, if you can liken him to Star Wars. So, this other, now mixing up research. There was one research that was talking about the music education process. And they were wondering why only certain students were able to sight read well. And that those same students were only able to sight read in certain keys. And they couldn't really read that well in keys with flats and sharps. And so they just, decided to do some more study on that. And so the other thing that I loved about it was that the professor that wrote this publication was saying he felt that his own musical background was inadequate, that he came under the guidance of an instructor who was was aware of new trends in piano teaching, and that's what turned things around for him. Prior to that, his background was suffering a little bit because he had someone who was teaching him, and they weren't able to transform his playing in the way that he desired. So if you are not able to play in multiple keys, chances are it's going to limit you. But here's the other nice thing. I used to work in professional audio. You've heard me say that. And the beauty of that is that you get to sell keyboards that can do everything from arpeggiation to changing keys. You never have to transpose a day in your life if you know how to hit the right buttons. And I had a musician friend who was so furious with one of his friends that plays jazz but could only play in one key. And the friend was like, what's the problem? I have a keyboard that can do it for me. And he really knew how to work that keyboard. But sometimes I wonder, well, how did he change keys so rapidly then? But it was because he set it up to work with his own band, and they knew exactly where he was going in his playing, and they all knew each other and backed each other up. But in another live situation with musicians that could change keys at the drop of a dime, he might have been in trouble, even with the keyboard that transposed for him. Because if you don't really know where the music is going, that's a problem. Okay. So this other publication the same publication was talking about resisting bad teaching, and he was just talking about the way it feels sometimes that performing music is reserved for only the ones that are gifted, and it's seen as a privilege. So it's just nice to live in the times when that's no longer true. So here we are in the 20th century, the 21st century, where music is literally at the fingertips of anyone. If you have a computer, and it doesn't matter if it sounds like it's composed on a computer or not, at least you're making music. I think that's the idea. Make the best music you can make. Don't judge others, and do what you can. And then if you're able to do more, then do more. So it's just saying that during his time, a child's first keyboard experience started with the key of C major and revolved around middle C on the piano. And I love what he's saying here. He's saying that it must have been sheer monotony to see somebody repeat middle C over and over and over again. Now, here's the thing I noticed in the jazz class, in jazz workshop, there was a lot of repeating. And you heard that in the 2-minute samples that I played for you. And I played for you the samples of what went on in class earlier. That's just how it is. And when you play with musicians that play by ear and by chords, there's a lot of repetition. That's just how it's done. But, I know what he's saying. Those old piano methods used to just have you play middle C, and that was all you played for that day in that lesson. And in fact, that's how I learned. So my first teacher was a family member who knew how to teach, taught herself how to teach, and then taught me. And then the first thing I learned on the piano was where to find C and how to find all of the C's on the piano. So let me step out of that publication for a moment. Let me go back to the jazz harmony because I like what they were saying. So they just say here that jazz is, for the most part, tonal harmony. But I wanted to get to that part in the preface where he says there's no such thing as jazz harmony. So maybe it says it here. Further, we will learn about decorating, embellishing chords, the relation between melody and harmony, and much more. The book, however, is not meant primarily to be a practical guide to playing and practicing harmony on the piano. And I still can't find that quote where he says that chords are not really jazz chords are not really jazz chords. Chords are just chords. Basically, that's what he was saying. But I'll go back and I'll comb through this publication for you because we're going to be talking about this for a while. So get ready for that here in our Chords for Students topic that will probably continue at least through the end of the year, and then we'll decide what to do for 2020. And it will definitely involve chords. I think I'm going to keep this chords thing going. If anything, I may start talking a little bit more about scales because I feel like some of my students are interested in scales. So now my wellness tip. Before I changed my location, I told you I was going to get some orange juice, and then I came back and I got some more orange juice. And I want you to start thinking about keeping well for the fall. I've been drinking a lot of matcha lately as well, which contains caffeine, but it gives you a different type of energy. But what I want to do now is see if our favorite doctor who's on television has any discussion at all about matcha tea or green tea. Let me see if he does. Because if he does, I want to share that with you. Because I get the newsletter. And so I want to share with you information as it comes to me so that you can keep well too. Now, while I'm on the subject of wellness, I know I talked about music making and wellness, and then seeing this professor this week and how old he was and how he was using music. I wouldn't say that he was ready to do like extensive physical activity, but he was able to play. I don't know anything else about how he uses music in his life, but to me, he seems so sharp that he lived for music. It's like he lived for it. And that was just so, oh my gosh, that was just so inspiring to me to see the joy. And again, just feel the love in the room. I can't even describe you how much heart this person has for teaching. And I just thought if I could just be a little bit more like that, that would be great. So very inspirational. Now let's get to Dr. Oz here. Because he is that doctor I've been talking about. My favorite doctor on television. That has to do with keeping well when it comes to food. And so there's a newsletter. Let's see. He talks about everything. From how to buy chicken to not being confused when you see natural versus organic to free range. When I see free range, I just think, okay, my chickens were free to roam. They had friends. It's nice to know that. And so I have to laugh, I say that to my friends when we're out eating chicken. Yes, I eat chicken. And I grew up eating chicken. I still eat chicken. But I say to my friends, I wonder if this chicken had any friends. I like it when my chickens have friends. Let's see. Now, there's a way to search here. Now I want to search matcha. Ooh, look. Oh my gosh. You guys are going to love this. Oh my goodness. There is an ultimate guide to matcha drinking. And this came out last year. Okay. Perfect. So there's a video and there's also commentary on it. So green tea versus matcha. Let's just read this a little bit. I can't even pronounce all of these words. But it just says that before you order one of these bright green drinks, read this guide. So definitely if you can read that. You know what? I can post this. I'm going to have to listen to it later. But let me see if I can post this on the C Major Before Facebook page. So that if you go there, you will see it. Okay, and it has to do with what we talked about on today's podcast. So from time to time, I will just share a little bit about what I use to try to keep well and feel well for myself. And I'm not perfect at it yet, but it's something I'm always interested in. So you're seeing a presentation right now where they're telling you the truth about matcha. So green tea versus matcha tea is supposed to have more healthy antioxidants, more amino acids, and so it really gives you more. That's what it says. Okay, so guys, have fun reading this. I hope that you like it. And thank you for listening. I'm just applauding the fact that we do have that article available. Okay, let me step out of this for a moment. And in a few minutes, we're going to end today's broadcast. I'm going to give you your homework assignment. And so before I give you my homework assignment here on the podcast, let me just say I have some student shout outs. There are some amazing students that I work with. And one student had such an extensive theory conversation with me this week. It just blew me away. He's really, really interested in starting to apply some of what he knows and then to apply some of what we've been talking about. So I'm really trying to straighten out his fingering a little bit, his technique. So we've been talking about the Bach, 2 inventions. We've been talking about the well-tempered clavier. We're talking about what it means to play in all keys. And he knows a lot about music already, but just not so much about piano music. So I'm excited to be able to bring some of this to him. So shout out to him. I mean, we talked about everything from secondary dominance to ornaments used in music, when to recognize when you're playing a turn. What does that mean? We talked about the ambiguity in some of these terms that are used for ornamentation. We talked about how to use it in performance practice. Some of my experience with it, we pointed to appoggiatura versus a cacciatura. It was just an amazing conversation. So big shout out to him. So excited for him. Let me say this too, for the students that may be worried that I talk about you. I'm not trying to say anything negative against any of you. And in fact, I want to keep the confidentiality. And unless it's a public presentation where names are presented in public, I won't say anything publicly in terms of your name, and certainly without permission. So that's what we do here in the podcast. I'm hoping that somebody will get some inspiration. You may say to yourself, wow, maybe I should learn a little bit more about music theory. If you can, do it. If you can. The next person I want to shout out is someone who is very, very good at piano. In fact, she was so good, I've mentioned her before in the podcast, she taught herself for a full year how to play piano, and then her parents decided it was time to get her a teacher. And so because of that, we were able to come together and we have our lessons. And so what I like most about her is that she's open to the idea. So we've been providing some supplemental ways for her to practice piano, and one of which includes text notation. So she's playing this song called Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It's by the guy that plays it on the ukulele. And so that's all about chords. I mean, in addition to hearing his beautiful voice singing the melody, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the accompaniment is what's so striking about it. And she's been really, really open to seeing how to play that and how to look at it within the context of text and see it as inversions of chords that she already knows how to play, and then how to put the bass with that. So we were able to come up with a chart, a rubric for her. And I'm just really, really proud of her progress. She's almost to the end of the song, and that was her goal. So now she'll have something to add to her list of songs that she can play for family. So congratulations to her. So it's not easy to learn chord patterns and to learn chord inversions. And so these next two students, I will say, they've made some really, really big progress. Now, these are students that I inherited that came from a different method altogether. You've heard of Suzuki, right? I've mentioned that here on the podcast. And so sometimes when you've learned Suzuki, your ear is super strong, but your reading is what you need to focus on a little bit more. And so we've been doing that, but within the context of really keeping their oral skills intact, AURAL, and then showing them how to see when they're playing by chords. And so they've been working on a French song, they've been working on a Spanish song, and they're working on some music by Brahms, and they're working on some other music. And so I'm just really proud of their progress. They're really seeing how to start to work on parts of a song. Think about the harmony first, and then think about the melody second, and then think about how to practice hands alone. Think about how to think in terms of chords and chord inversions, how to really see where the tonic is in their pieces, and to not be afraid to slow down the harmonic rhythm a little bit so they can really, really get it when they're playing and they're practicing. So shout out to them. So lastly, I want to shout out a student who is kind of like me. She's going through her own transformation and really trying to open herself up to stepping out of her classical realm and really going into the jazz world. So she just attended her first concert that I loved, that I learned about, and she has attended her first jazz concert in the city. I won't say the place. I'm going to protect her confidentiality. And I'm just really, really proud of her for stepping out of her comfort zone. So, congratulations. Okay, so now I had some announcement I was going to tell you about. Now this is new. The only reason why I'm announcing is because they both came across my desk in the same week. And so to see that there are some amazing concerts going on in the greater New York City area is always exciting. Now, I have attended concerts at both of these places, both upon invitation, by the way, which I'm huge on. You know, I really believe in being invited to come someplace, to go someplace, because sometimes it's just better to be invited, but a genuine invitation, you know what I mean? Okay, so let me see if I can get to that. What's happening with my information here. Okay. Well, it's freezing a little bit on me, so I'll just tell you that if you can check out Bravura Philharmonic Orchestra, based in Princeton, New Jersey, or at least South Jersey, But I believe the concert's going to take place in the normal place. And spelled Bravura, Bravura Philharmonic Orchestra. They're featuring for the first time a saxophonist. Now, I don't know if I'm going to... I really don't know if I'm going to attend that concert, but I'm going to be listening for more. I think I'll see if there's maybe a video of the artist. Excuse me. So I can check out more of his music making first. But if you're up for that, definitely support them. They're a great group. They do a lot of community concerts, and it's just amazing to see how they have evolved, really. Okay. And let's go over to this other publication that I received. This happens to be taking place also in Princeton. So if you know anything about Princeton University, you know that they also have a concert series and a season of concerts. And so the one that stood out to me the most, and I was thinking, I really wouldn't mind going to see this. And the picture is great. The photo is great. Plenty of opportunities to hear pianists and singers. But I'm really interested in this choir. If you saw the photo, check it out. Go to Princeton University Concerts. And this photo is just striking. I mean, a lot of the photos are striking, but this one particular photo... Let me just turn to the page really quickly. Give me one moment. Okay, so here it is. I found it. I just got distracted. There was another concert now I'm interested in going to. But this one is going to take place in November, so it's going to be chilly around that time. And it will take place in the Princeton University Chapel. But it's on a Monday night at 7:30, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to attend that. But it's the Georgian State Vocal Ensemble. Now, this picture is just amazing. You can see the group standing in the rain for this photo, and their faces just look so full of joy, just amazing. Exquisitely rendered, hauntingly beautiful, and that was quoted by the New York Times. So you can read a little bit more about this concert and the program. I mean, it's going to be all a cappella. And it's all sacred and folk songs from Eastern Europe, which I really want to hear this. Maybe I could find some video of them online. But check out the Princeton University concerts. Also, if you are into spirituals, I was glad to see this, actually. I love the music of Dvorak. And my teachers used to talk about Burley. So it looks like it's going to be a Dvorak and Burley American Connection concert. That sounds really interesting. Also in November, but it's on a Sunday afternoon. So I actually may be able to attend that one. But if you've ever been to the auditorium over there at Princeton, it's just amazing. The concert hall there. So that's what's going on around the greater New York City area that came across my desk that's really super interesting. And feel free to check out some concerts. Try to listen to some music. Try to get out and hear some music and as well as make music. And so next week is going to be all about the D major chord, at least over at the C Major Radio Show. We're probably going to mix things up a little bit more over here because I want to get to our blues discussion and to show you how we're using chords. But then blues as well. Who knows? Maybe I can find a D major blues example to share with you. Happy autumn. And then I'm going to be seeing you next weekend on C Major Before the Show. And so just to get you in the mood for what's coming up, we will be talking about the candy giving season that's coming up. You all know what that is. And so just be listening and be grateful. Be grateful for everything that you have in your life in terms of music. Dream big when it comes to your music making. Good things are coming to you. Make the best music you can make. And I'll see you next time right here on C Major Before the Show.